missing artwork cost King Henry VIII the equivalent of $1 million. It vanished sometime after his death in the 16th century.
For centuries, the cause of King Henry VIII's death has remained shrouded in mystery. Was it illness, lingering injuries, or something far more insidious? Modern DNA analysis has uncovered disturbing clues within his remains, revealing hidden illnesses that shaped his final years. These findings challenge long-accepted accounts of his decline, exposing a deeper story of pain, power, and vulnerability. Beyond the man's notorious reign lies a stark glimpse into the harsh medical realities of Tudor England, where even a king's strength could not escape the grip of disease. The mystery surrounding Henry's death. King Henry VIII's death in 1547 has long been a subject of intrigue and speculation among historians and enthusiasts alike. Despite a well-documented reign, the particulars of how he died remain clouded in uncertainty. Official accounts often describe a decline marked by obesity, leg ulcers, and bouts of illness, but these observations only scratch the surface. The real question has always been what underlying conditions or factors ultimately brought this formidable king to his end. For centuries, theories circulated, ranging from complications related to his injuries to diseases typical of the Tudor era. But these explanations were largely based on written records and anecdotal evidence, bodies of knowledge limited by the scientific understanding of the time. With advances in forensic and genetic research, new methods have emerged that offer the possibility of revealing more precise answers. Yet, until recently, no conclusive evidence had definitively explained Henry's final health struggles. The king's physical condition near death was notoriously poor. Contemporaries described him as morbidly obese, riddled with painful leg ulcers, and struggling with a failing leg that reportedly never healed fully after a jousting accident in 1536. These visible ailments suggested a life plagued by chronic illness, but whether they were causes or symptoms remained unclear. Compounding this mystery was Henry's reportedly volatile personality and erratic behavior in his later years, which some believe may have had physiological roots. Adding layers to the puzzle is the political and religious turbulence surrounding his reign, which obscured personal details behind statecraft and propaganda. Many contemporaneous accounts served agendas, possibly obscuring honest reporting on his health for reasons of court politics. This only deepened the opacity around his final days, prompting historians to search beyond traditional sources for answers. The physical remains of Henry VIII, housed in St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle, have long been a key, albeit challenging, resource for investigation. The conditions of his skeletal remains provide clues, but also pose limitations due to decay and preservation methods used in the 16th century. Until recently, the technology to fully analyze these remains was unavailable, hampering efforts to uncover definitive medical explanations. Modern science, particularly DNA analysis, offers hope to break through centuries of uncertainty. By examining genetic material extracted from Henry's remains, researchers can now probe for evidence of diseases, infections, and genetic disorders that might have contributed to his demise. This scientific leap opens a new chapter in Tudor studies, blending historical records with hard data. However, such exploration is not without controversy. Ancient DNA analysis is complex and sometimes yields ambiguous results, requiring cautious interpretation. Scholars emphasize combining these findings with historical context to avoid sensationalism and maintain accuracy. The unresolved questions around Henry's death are not simply academic. They challenge how we understand the man behind the crown. Was his demise the result of natural decline, a hidden illness, or even medical mismanagement unknown to his contemporaries? These questions set the stage for the revelations that modern forensic science now brings to light. The anticipation of finally answering these mysteries has kept historians and scientists collaborating closely, pursuing a clearer picture of a king's final chapter that has lingered nearly 5 centuries. The historical records surrounding Henry's health provide a fascinating, yet sometimes conflicting portrait of the ruler's physical and mental struggles. Historical accounts of Henry's health. During his lifetime, Henry VIII was documented as a vigorous and athletic young monarch, but his later years tell a very different story. Chroniclers noted a gradual transformation from a robust king to a man crippled by disease and weight gain. These descriptions come from eyewitnesses and courtiers whose records shaped early narratives about his health decline. Notable among the ailments frequently mentioned are his leg ulcers, which became infamous both during his reign and after his death. These wounds reportedly festered painfully for years, severely limiting his mobility. The descriptions often emphasize the smell and discomfort, suggesting they were infected and possibly worsened by poor medical care common in Tudor England. Accounts also detail Henry's bouts of gout and type 2 diabetes-like symptoms, inferred from his reported swelling, fatigue, and other physical complaints. Although these diagnoses are modern interpretations, the signs were consistent with chronic metabolic disorders. These conditions would have compounded the effects of his obesity and vascular issues, creating a debilitating cycle. The king's injuries, particularly the jousting accident at over 40 years old, played a significant role in this narrative. Seen as a critical turning point, the injury affected his legs severely, damaging nerves and blood vessels. Contemporary letters and reports attribute much of his later immobility and pain to the after-effects of this trauma, painting a direct line between the accident and his health's downfall. Mental health is one of the topics that has been considered less, but still, more is done by historians. Some chroniclers connected mood changes with the periods of depression and maybe even dementia or some other neurodegenerative diseases with Henry's condition. The course of his actions and unstable behavior during the last 10 years support this theory, yet still, very little concrete evidence is available. These records, however, reveal an important thing: the medical understanding and treatment approaches of that time. The practitioners had to deal with bleeding, herbal remedies, and a variety of purges, which often exacerbated the conditions purely by accident. The absence of antibiotics and sterile techniques resulted in a situation where infections could turn fatal, particularly in the case of chronic wounds, like Henry's ulcers, which were probably a great source of suffering for him. The historical sources, even though they are extensively documented, still have some reliability questions about them, mainly because of political bias, or the fact that people tend to judge the case of Henry negatively. Some authors preferred to present Henry in a good light, while others went the other way and highlighted his negative characteristics. This uncertainty makes it difficult to come up with a fair judgment, based only on texts. On the other hand, the historical narratives still have a great deal of value in presenting the setting for the DNA and forensic studies to be performed. They create the expectations and the limits of the modern inquiries, thereby establishing a connection between the past's views and the present-day scientific findings. The most prominent thing that these ancient documents uncover is a king who, both from the outside and the inside, was very much battling a lot of health issues that not only characterized his body, but also his reign to a large extent. The physical toll of Henry's life invites deeper analysis of how his injuries and lifestyle intertwined to hasten the decline chronicled by his contemporaries. Effects of injuries and lifestyle. King Henry VIII's physical hardships were shaped not only by disease, but also by the consequences of his actions and lifestyle choices. His passion for jousting, while emblematic of his youthful vigor, left him permanently crippled. The 1536 accident fractured his leg and injured major blood vessels, leading to chronic pain and poor circulation that never fully healed. As years passed, the injury worsened, contributing to severe swelling and ulcers around his legs. These wounds were notoriously difficult to treat in the 16th century and became a persistent source of infection. The repeated breakdown of skin and exposure to bacteria likely caused systemic complications, including sepsis, which could have significantly shortened his lifespan. Obesity became another critical factor. Henry's weight ballooned in his later years, reportedly surpassing 400 pounds. This excessive body mass would have placed enormous strain on his heart and joints, exacerbating mobility issues. Obesity also increases the risk of type 2 diabetes and vascular diseases, conditions that historical and modern evidence suggest Henry endured. Lifestyle factors such as diet and lack of exercise compounded these problems. Tudor kings often consumed rich, calorie-dense foods, and Henry's immobility after his leg injury drastically limited physical activity. This lifestyle created a feedback loop. Injury led to reduced movement, which led to weight gain, worsening health overall. Several historians claim that Henry's deteriorating health hurt his personality and decision-making, thus building a psychological burden along with the physical one. Depressive states and irritability are usually associated with chronic pain and limited movement, and that might be one of the reasons for some of the accounts describing his later reign as tumultuous. In addition, health treatments back then were very basic, and sometimes even harmful. Bloodletting and poultices applied to his ulcers might have worsened infections instead of soothing them. There were no antibiotic substances at the time, and so many wounds were a continual danger. Henry, as a remarkable figure, continued to participate in politics and religion until his very last days, which means he must have had great fortitude, existing together with pain. His will to rule might even have hidden the fact that his health was really bad. Injuries, along with the way of life, made the king's health totally weak and finally brought him to death. The DNA evidence in this context becomes not just strong, but also holds the key to unveiling the exact nature of these chronic conditions. Such a blend of physical trauma and lifestyle consequences invites close scientific examination, revealing a story far deeper than historical records alone can tell. The DNA analysis. The quest to uncover the true cause of King Henry VIII's death entered a new phase with breakthroughs in genetic technology. For decades, experts had to rely primarily on written accounts, archaeological findings, and skeletal examinations to piece together clues. But the development of advanced DNA extraction methods from ancient remains opened a door to more definitive answers. This scientific revolution transformed Henry's remains from silent relics into a source of fresh information. The DNA testing began with careful sampling from Henry's bones and teeth, conducted under strict protocols to avoid contamination. Specialists then used high-throughput sequencing technology to analyze his genome, searching for genetic markers linked to disease or infection. This delicate process required patience and precision, as centuries-old DNA fragments are often degraded or mixed with modern contaminants. Researchers focused on identifying signs of chronic infections, metabolic disorders, or hereditary diseases that might explain Henry's physical decline. They were particularly interested in genetic markers related to diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and infections like syphilis, which had been rumored but never confirmed in historical speculation. The goal was to either support or challenge these long-standing theories with empirical data. The study additionally took into account the possible interaction between Henry's environment and lifestyle and his genetic predispositions. The scientists wanted to paint a clearer picture of the king's health by the combination of modern medical knowledge and historical context. This interdisciplinary approach was a novel investigative framework that included history, medicine, and genetics. Ethical considerations were always at the forefront during the whole process. The research group intended to maintain the historical figure's dignity while gaining objective knowledge. They steered through the controversy that inevitably comes with such a deep exploration of a royal remain's secrets, being aware that the findings might change the public view of one of the most famous kings in history. The DNA analysis was one of the steps in an overall change in the way historical research is done, with biology and genetics taking more and more to do with revealing the past. In the case of Henry, the importance of the matter was particularly great because of his historical significance and the years of speculation around his death. The very fact that long-debated questions could finally be properly answered resulted in a very lively debate among scholars and the general public. At first, the subject was very controversial with the mazes of gene research, but the first portion of the analysis produced outcomes that were not expected. Genetic data started to disclose a more intricate scenario of Henry's illness than was ever understood. The team's discoveries opened up new speculative avenues for very old symptoms that were recorded but never fully understood. As the pieces of the puzzle started coming together through DNA, historians and scientists alike braced for the insights that could finally explain the king's mysterious and tragic final years. What the DNA revealed. The results of the DNA analysis delivered a stunning and transformative insight into King Henry VIII's long-debated health struggles. For centuries, historians and physicians alike have speculated about the ailments that plagued the Tudor monarch, but now science has brought clarity to the mystery. The genetic data revealed that Henry's health decline was not simply a matter of excess or injury. It was underpinned by inherited vulnerabilities that made him far more fragile than his public image ever suggested. Among the most significant discoveries was strong evidence pointing toward diabetes mellitus, most likely type 2. This diagnosis aligns closely with contemporary accounts of his obesity, constant fatigue, mood swings, and the slow healing of his chronic leg ulcers. What had once been described vaguely as dropsy or swelling can now be placed within a modern medical framework. The condition would have caused erratic energy levels, weight gain, and an increased risk of infection, all factors that likely exacerbated his declining mobility and his growing frustration in later years. The DNA analysis also revealed traces of a severe bacterial infection consistent with Treponema pallidum, the pathogen responsible for syphilis. This confirmation adds a dark new layer to the king's medical portrait. Syphilis, rampant in Renaissance Europe, was both misunderstood and incurable in Henry's time. Left untreated, it could cause widespread organ damage, cognitive decline, and personality changes. The disease's neurological effects, in particular, may explain historical reports of Henry's volatile temper, paranoia, and irrational decision-making in his final decades. Such revelations invite historians to view his tyranny through a lens of suffering as well as power. Equally compelling were the findings related to cardiovascular health. Genetic markers suggested a high risk of heart disease, including possible coronary artery complications that would have been intensified by obesity and metabolic strain. Chronic inflammation from his infections may have worsened these conditions, placing immense stress on his heart and circulatory system. Taken together, these overlapping ailments formed a deadly synergy, a perfect storm that ultimately undermined his strength and hastened his demise. Interestingly, the study dispelled several long-standing myths. There was no evidence to support theories of mercury poisoning, a treatment occasionally used for syphilis, that some had speculated might have contributed to his death. Nor was there an indication of deliberate poisoning or other toxic exposure. This absence of sensational explanations reinforces the reality that Henry's decline was the tragic result of biology and circumstance, not conspiracy. Further analysis confirmed that his notorious leg ulcers were far more serious than superficial wounds. The infections had likely spread into his bloodstream, leading to chronic inflammation and possibly sepsis, a life-threatening condition that, in the pre-antibiotic age, offered little hope of recovery. Collectively, these discoveries reshaped the story of Henry VIII's final years. His deterioration was not the sudden fall of a tyrant, but a slow, agonizing descent caused by genetic predisposition, infectious disease, and the limits of Tudor medicine. In revealing the biological truths behind the legend, modern science has given us not only a clearer picture of Henry's death, but also a more compassionate understanding of the man behind the crown. The emerging medical portrait invites reflection on the personal human cost behind grand historical events. Impact on Tudor history. The groundbreaking DNA findings challenge long-held assumptions about King Henry VIII's final years and legacy. Traditionally portrayed as a towering figure whose decline was mostly attributed to injuries and lifestyle excesses, Henry now emerges as a man grappling with chronic, complex health issues that profoundly influenced his reign. This shift compels historians to reconsider how his physical state shaped political decisions, social policies, and even personal relationships during a turbulent period in English history. Historical accounts highlighted his weight and wounds, but the genetic evidence introduces the hidden force of diseases like diabetes and syphilis, which explain much about his erratic behavior and deteriorating condition. These illnesses would have imposed neurological and psychological burdens, providing context for the king's infamous temper and abrupt changes in disposition. It reframes the narrative not just as one of a tyrant, but as a profoundly suffering individual confronting the limits of his body. The presence of chronic syphilis, in particular, adds a layer of intrigue, as it intertwines with Tudor politics, court dynamics, and even succession concerns. Syphilis was a stigmatized disease, and its influence on Henry's health and personality may have played a subtle but significant role in court intrigues and his relationships with wives and advisors. Recognizing this connection opens new pathways for interpreting events that defined the era. Moreover, the evidence of cardiovascular disease dovetails with the known risks of his obesity and inactivity, emphasizing how intertwined Henry's lifestyle was with his declining health. Chronic illness no longer feels secondary, but central to understanding the dynamics of his reign's later years. It offers a biological explanation for the once dismissed physical and mental symptoms chronicled by contemporaries. These revelations also provoke reflection on Tudor medicine and the limits of healthcare at the time. The severe infections and metabolic conditions that modern science can now diagnose would have been untreatable, if not misunderstood, in the 16th century. Henry's suffering exemplifies how medical shortcomings shaped historical outcomes in ways rarely acknowledged before. By looking at the health of Henry in this way, historians get a more intricately layered image of his leadership, an amalgamation of human softness and brutal willpower. It strengthens the case against the simplistic characterizations and, at the same time, opens up the issue of empathy, though not without the controversies and cruelties of his reign. This intricate mixture of different qualities brings the king's lasting attraction into the limelight. Moreover, the results lead to a reconsideration of the Tudor court's reactions to his sickness. The struggle between the need for political stability and the king's inability to rule underscores how much the kingdom relied on his personal strength. Acknowledging his medical decline brings new understanding to the power struggles and fears that characterized this transformative period for England and were already in the air. The combination of genetic insights and historical narratives offers us a new view of Henry VIII, not merely as a ruler, but as a human being struggling with the harsh realities of sickness, treatment, and power. This viewpoint raises larger issues concerning the role of health in shaping history, emphasizing the fact that the personal frequently has a very significant impact on the political. While we are contemplating these thoughts, the developing tale of Henry's death is echoing not only in Tudor England, but also everywhere else, suggesting the need to change our thinking about the remarkable way in which science has been able to enlighten us regarding the past. The intersection of biology and history seen here illustrates a promising frontier for understanding figures once known only through texts and artifacts. Broader implications for historical research. The revelations surrounding King Henry VIII's death extend far beyond the story of one monarch. They represent a pivotal moment in the evolution of historical research, a demonstration of how modern science can illuminate mysteries that written records and traditional scholarship have long left unresolved. Through the application of DNA analysis and advanced forensic methods to centuries-old remains, historians and scientists are entering a new era of discovery. where the past is not only interpreted, but physically decoded. This synergy between disciplines promises to redefine how we understand history's most complex and misunderstood figures. By extracting and analyzing genetic information from ancient bones, researchers gain access to data that transcends the limits of conventional sources. Letters, chronicles, and portraits reveal personality and politics, but DNA exposes the intimate biological truths that shaped those lives. These discoveries provide a multidimensional view of the past, one where biology, archaeology, and documentary evidence intersect. Such integration compels historians to rethink long-standing methodologies, encouraging collaboration across the boundaries of science and the humanities. The historian's archive now extends from parchment to the genome. This new toolkit enables inquiry into far more than causes of death. It allows scholars to trace hereditary diseases, reconstruct diets, detect exposure to pathogens, and even map population movements or kinship ties. In doing so, it enriches our portraits of historical figures, portraying them not as distant icons, but as real individuals whose decisions and fates were shaped by physical conditions. The result is a more holistic understanding of human history, one that bridges the gap between abstract narrative and lived experience. At the same time, questions concerning morality come up that are just as critical as this research. The scientific inquiry into human remains entails giving respect, being transparent, and holding oneself accountable. Researchers have to deal with matters like the sensitivity of the culture, the approval of the descendants, and the ethics of disclosing medical information that was not known to the deceased person. During the illustrious reign of Henry VIII, his case stands as a true example of how genetic evidence can overturn misconceptions, resolve uncertainties, and provide solid proof against centuries of speculation. In this regard, science is no longer considered a resource for simplification of history, but rather as a means of deepening historical complexity. With every discovery, a more intricate human figure of the past is revealed, which confirms the notion that revision does not wipe out history. It simply sharpens it. To a larger extent, these practices underline the common weakness of mankind throughout the ages. They point out that disease, succession, and death are the common phenomena that tie the mighty and the meek together. Giving due importance to biology as a factor determining behavior and circumstance, historians come closer to understanding and being kinder to the power, conflict, and change involved when they look through the lens of biology. Moreover, this mixture of genealogies and histories delights the public's imagination, and thus it ups the connection between the academics and the general public. It leads the people to view the past as not dead and far away, but rather as a living continuum that is now amplified with the help of science. While the scientists are still busy unraveling the biological tales that are hidden in the remains and blood, the historical narration becomes more complex, more human, and more adventurous than ever before, as it is continuously open to being discovered. The evolving partnership of science and history promises to uncover countless secrets still hidden beneath centuries of time and speculation. Reflecting on Henry's legacy, King Henry VIII remains one of history's most recognizable monarchs, a ruler whose ambition reshaped nations and whose personal life still fascinates centuries later. Yet recent scientific discoveries add unexpected depth to his story. No longer seen only as a tyrant driven by ego and power, Henry now emerges as a man shaped and constrained by the relentless decline of his own body. Through the lens of modern DNA analysis and medical insight, we begin to understand the vulnerability behind the crown and how illness intertwined with authority to define his reign. The image of Henry as the commanding, larger-than-life figure who defied Rome and transformed England's destiny is deeply ingrained in history. However, uncovering the biological realities behind his later years invites a more nuanced perspective. Chronic pain, likely stemming from leg ulcers, head injuries, and metabolic disorders, tormented him daily. Such conditions, combined with the stress of rule and advancing age, could have profoundly affected his temperament. Episodes of anger, paranoia, or erratic judgment, once attributed purely to cruelty, may have reflected neurological or hormonal imbalances rather than sheer malice. Seeing Henry through this medical lens humanizes him, revealing the fragility hidden beneath his regal image. This understanding does not absolve Henry of his political ruthlessness, but it complicates it. Power in Tudor England was inseparable from survival, and for a king whose body was failing, control may have become both a necessity and an obsession. His marriages, religious reforms, and executions can thus be reinterpreted as desperate assertions of authority in the face of physical weakness. Pain, pride, and politics converged to create a monarch, both commanding and deeply insecure. A man fighting not just rivals and rebellion, but his own mortality. At the same time, Henry's legacy cannot be confined to his ailments. Despite his suffering, he accomplished seismic changes that shaped England's identity for centuries. The English Reformation, the birth of the Church of England, and the strengthening of royal bureaucracy all took root under his rule. That these transformations occurred while he battled chronic illness underscores the tenacity and contradiction of his character. He was both the architect of a new order and prisoner of his own body. His health revelations are not only a hint, but rather a direct demonstration of the limitations of Tudor medicine. The king, who had everything, physicians, money, and luxury, was still unable to resist the 16th century ignorance of the disease. Treatment was basic, cleanliness was non-existent, and the pain was not only endured, but also administered. Even within the grandeur of palaces, the shadow of suffering loomed, proving that privilege could not buy immunity from nature's laws. His story blurs the line between royalty and mortality, showing how even divine right kings were bound by flesh and frailty. Henry's agony is a reflection of the wider human plight of his time, and an indication that the gaps between greatness and frailty were alarmingly small. Thus, modern science acts as a link between the past and the present, illustrating the application of genetic research in reviving the histories of yore. The findings regarding Henry's condition prompt us to consider the interplay between biology and fate. His rule, which has been analyzed through power and morals for so long, now also falls under the category of cases where a disease has had a say in the making of history. At the end of the day, Henry VIII's saga is not merely that of luxury and power, but rather of survival. A man was hidden underneath the armor and the myth who was fighting a war against pain, aging, and decline. Realizing that struggle adds to his legacy instead of taking away from it. It makes us remember that the most powerful rulers are, at the same time, very much human with the same weaknesses as their subjects. Viewing things this way, Henry's story is like a new light cast upon it. A saga of power and suffering inextricably linked, a victory still oblivious to decay. The king who transformed England also proves the everlasting truth that not only strength, but the intricate, often hidden wars inside are what decide the course of history. Henry VIII's death was shaped by far more than injuries or old age. Modern DNA reveals a complex web of illness that redefines his final years. This new understanding changes how we see one of history's most notorious kings, blending his human vulnerability with his lasting impact. If you found this journey into history and science fascinating, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that uncover the truths beneath the surface, and watch the next video on your screen for another surprising twist from the past.